All right. Thanks for joining us today, everybody. Welcome. It's great to see so many of you here to learn about the Friends of Nevada Wilderness Bilingual Outreach Program. I hope you all take something away from this presentation to enhance public education and engagement in your area. My name is Joelle Marier. I am the Executive Director of the National Wilderness Stewardship Alliance. Before I introduce our presenter and we jump into today's topic, we have just a bit of housekeeping. We are recording today's webinar, as you likely heard, and we will send you a link to the recording via email, and we'll also post this on our YouTube channel and on our website. Um, we are scheduled for 1 hour today, and we have time set aside for questions at the end. So if you have questions during the presentation, that's great. If you don't want to forget your question, pop it into the chat, and I'll do what I can to make sure we answer as many as possible during the Q&A. You're also welcome to share your question verbally at the end by raising your hand, and we'll call on folks and you can share your question with Meg at that time. So out of respect for our presenters and other participants, please mute your microphone throughout the webinar, and you can unmute when you're asked to share your question during the Q&A and come on camera if you like. So with that, let's jump in. Today, I am so excited to welcome Meg Tait. Meg joins us as the Northern Nevada Stewardship Coordinator for Friends of Nevada Wilderness. She has been in her current position for a few years now and came to um, Friends of Nevada Wilderness before that on the trail crew where she spent 5 years. And Meg has been instrumental in building their bilingual outreach program, and she's here to share some of this journey and lessons learned with you all. NWSA is also proud to have funded portions of this project through our Wilderness Stewardship Performance Grant Program that we offer in partnership with the U.S. Forest Service. So thanks so much for joining us today, Meg, and I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Uh, yeah, I was going to introduce myself a little bit, but Joe, you did a great job. I'm really excited to be here talking about the bilingual program with Friends of Nevada Wilderness. Friends of Nevada Wilderness is a 501c3 conservation nonprofit, and we work throughout the state of Nevada, advocating for wilderness designation, doing education and outreach of these public lands, and stewarding these areas. Um, a little bit of my background that wasn't touched on is that I was born in South Florida to Argentine parents. So when I was 10 years old, we moved back to Argentina to grow up with the culture and my family back there. And I think that is important to speak before I talk too much about this program, because I do have that background and that really amazing sense of who I am comes from that. And after graduating secondary school, I moved back to South Florida and got my degree in environmental science. And then, as it was mentioned, I moved back and forth seasonally, working on the trail crew in Nevada throughout all the beautiful wilderness areas. And then I would work in the Everglades National Park in my winter season when it was still hot and buggy in Florida, but winter everywhere else. And so on Trail Crew, I think one of the first little sparks of maybe this whole program started when we were working really in a remote trail in eastern Nevada, and we came across these sheep and we dispersed them. They went everywhere, and we ended up walking upon the sheep herders who didn't speak any English. So I was there to kind of say, sorry, we messed up your sheep. We're just working on the trail. We're coming through. Like, we'll be back around 4 going back the same way. And I think that kind of sparked in me this, like, maybe I can have Spanish speaking part of my job in the United States. Like, it didn't feel like something possible until maybe that time. And then I got hired on full time in 2022 as a stewardship coordinator, and it started to unfold. I should have changed the slides. This is my background slide. Um, And then in 2022, I presented for a Facebook group called Latinos de Nevada. And with that, I was able to talk about what wilderness is, public lands in Nevada, and how to come out on projects and help these areas. Um, it was very informal. I think it was a 30-minute live and just a random contact that happened to do this in 2022 with me. In 2023, I led the Latino Conservation Week hike. This is when things started to form a little, found out that Latino conservation groups specifically exist. And then in 2024 is when the bilingual program was officially funded. This was really important because at this point we had grant-driven deliverables, and it's kind of how the program started to form itself. It's important to note that we didn't have specific goals set for the program at this time, except that we wanted to translate our 40th anniversary What is Wilderness brochure. And that was a big goal for me specifically, the bilingual program. And then the rest of the program was just going to follow through what the deliverables in our grants were we proposed for. So that was 18 months of the program that was kind of already drawn out and ready to go based on what we proposed. Um, so this is our What is Wilderness brochure. I'm very excited that this exists. It took a lot of effort. I learned a lot of things. I didn't go to school for translation. I am fluent in English and Spanish, reading, writing, speaking, but it's not easy to grab paragraphs and a whole brochure and translate not only the words, but the ideas behind it. And there's also very specific language that, I mean, you all probably understand, but there's language that doesn't translate exactly, or like words like wilderness that are very specific to the United States, not just the English language. And wilderness with a uppercase W means something so different. You know, it's designated by Congress. It has all this, like on the next slide, um, all the different, what qualifies as wilderness, all this backstory that is, if you understand wilderness, you understand the whole concept, but it's really hard to translate that. And that was one of the biggest goals once we set out to translate this brochure was what is wilderness? How do we say that in Spanish? How do we explain it? Um, so working through this process was pretty hard. Translating itself is pretty hard. I realize it's the struggles that came with it were that it's really time consuming. You're not translating word for word. You have to find the sentence and you have to work through the concepts of it. Again, it's just very hard. And I think that was one of the biggest struggles is figuring out how time consuming it was and a little bit you can't do too much at the same time. It's like you only could do a paragraph because then my brain was fried specifically. And I think it's just because you're trying to figure out a neutral way because there is so many different dialects in Spanish. So that comes with like I'm from Argentina and we speak a Spanish that's more from Spain and some influence of Italy. And it depends on who you're speaking to. We have different words for the same thing. And I think that was also interesting to work through. And I think that it was really important to notice that I needed support bouncing ideas off of people and proofreading things, making sure I wasn't just writing it in the language I knew, but in general, people would understand it, and that it also made sense. It's like when you look at something for too long, it gets to the point where you think there's nothing else you could do to it. So that was a big um, challenge was just realizing I needed other folks to help out. And then that is it just started from the beginning when I couldn't figure out how to say wilderness. We brainstormed. Thankfully, there is another staff with us that is also bilingual. So there was reasonings that wild places, which you would say lugares salvajes in Spanish, he's like, no, that doesn't resonate with me. And then wild land, tierras silvestres, like you would say wildflowers is the word silvestre. And it was just going back and forth with how we wanted to say this. And we came up with uh, áreas silvestres designadas, which in English, if we're translating wilderness areas to Spanish, I would say áreas silvestres designadas. And if we translate that to English, word for word, it would be designated wild areas. And it's the best we think would work. And apart from just the title, apart from just what wilderness area is, the whole brochure goes through how it gets designated, what qualifies as wilderness, what it means to be designated, and who designates it. So that is such an important part of this brochure, is being able to explain to folks more than just a sentence of what wilderness area is and why it's important. And a feedback I got, which I'm really happy about, is that one of our AmeriCorps down in Southern Nevada, whose family was all Spanish speakers, said they finally were able to explain what their job was in a more profound way than I just go work outside to their family, and that their family finally understood the importance of the work they were doing because they have this bigger idea of wilderness areas, the importance of it, and the work we do with it. So I'm really proud of this brochure, this What is Wilderness brochure. And from there, it kind of stemmed through our different grant-driven deliverables. So this was thankfully through matching funds with the Wilberforce Foundation. So we were able to work on that. And from then, our bilingual program was funded through the NWSA WSP, which is the National Wilderness Stewardship Alliance Wilderness Stewardship Performance Program, which we were very thankful for. It was one of our stepping stones for this program as a whole. And another funding source we had was the NFF MAP, which is the National Forest Foundation Matching Award Program. And each grant had a little different purpose, and I'll go through that in a minute. But we're really thankful for having also a diversity in funding that helps secure more longevity and also a diversity in what is needed. So even though we have a bilingual program, having these two grants is kind of what set our goals for the 18 months that we had these grants and what we were going to do under the program. So through the end was that the Jarbidge Wilderness Area currently, and this was the beginning of 2024, I think we applied 2023. The Jarbidge Wilderness Area, which is in northeastern Nevada, currently had an education score of 0, which we aim to raise by 4 points. We proposed that we'd raise 2 points for general education on the area and responsible recreation, and another 2 points for providing educational material and opportunities to the underserved Spanish-speaking population in Nevada. So what we did under this grant was 2 Jarbidge trips, an insert for Jarbidge Wilderness for our What is Wilderness. So the brochure I spoke on before has room for an insert. So depending on the wilderness area that we're handing those in, we have an English and a Spanish version of an insert specific to that location. So far we have 2, and I'm working on 2 more. So it's can be a general brochure, and it could also be very specific to the location. And also a great thing that we did under the NWSA WSP was the Leave No Trace reference cards. Those were amazing. It was I was super impressed how excited people were for those Leave No Trace cards, because it was an easy, actionable item they can do, is following the rules of Leave No Trace and responsible recreation. And those were great to hand out. So being able to fund that and buy those was a great educational material, which I was shocked by, just because I felt like it was something already used, already known. But then again, that was just my perception on being outside for so long. So here are the 2 projects. The Jarbidge Memorial Project was done to maintain a couple miles of trail and to build 2 metal horse corrals. And then the Jarbidge Trail work was a separate year. And we also worked on trail. And these 2 projects, we talked a lot about how Jarbidge was designated, its 60th anniversary, which was last year, and how important these areas are and how to properly recreate in them. So with that, we handed out the Jarbidge inserts. And with these are the Spanish ones. With these, we spoke on what wilderness, how the wilderness was designated, what year was designated, where, how many acres, how large it was, how to explore the area and what to see, what to look out for, as well as responsible recreation. You'll hear that word a lot. That is in almost everything we did under the bilingual program. And then these are kind of just the numbers we got from the end of our grant cycle with the WSP. 27 volunteers, 664 volunteer hours. And then the amount of brochures that were handed out was also amazing. Over 270 what is wilderness brochures in Spanish and over 60 in English. Some of these were put out at the ranger stations and others were handed out by hand to people on the trail, people on the projects. We also got a lot of interest in folks who wanted to share it with somebody else. So that was really exciting to see these brochures actually go out to the public and get used. And then for our next grant, the National Forest Foundation MAP, we proposed to engage the Spanish-speaking forest users in responsible recreation, education, and offer bilingual volunteer stewardship opportunities on the Humboldt-Toyabe. And then with this grant, we had multiple projects and hikes in Reno, in Vegas. We had a Latino Conservation Week hike and a Hispanic Heritage Month hike, as well as the inserts, like I showed, of Jarbidge, but of Mount Rose Wilderness, which is outside of Reno. And again, the diversity in grants kind of helped us have a diversity in projects. They're all going to be centered around education, outreach, and stewardship, but with a little bit different emphasis on what we're doing under each one and who we're reaching out to. So I was just going to highlight a few of the ones under the NFF because I think they were really important to notice and to learn through the bilingual program is our Latino Conservation Week hike. This was the second year we were doing it. So we had already a community of folks that had come the first time to invite. And that just makes things easier because you kind of, I expected them to come, at least a few of them, and they did. So the Carpenters Union, this was the second year they came out. And we also had a family, a group of three a parent and kids, and then also some UNR students. So the university out of Reno and they weren't Spanish speakers. They were taking Spanish as a minor. And part of their work, they had to participate in some Hispanic Heritage Month activity. And they decided to come out on the hike. So with that, it was a really diverse group of folks. And so 10 hikers, we talked about Leave No Trace, wilderness, and stewardship projects. And of the area in general, we were in Mount Rose Wilderness, which is the closest wilderness to Reno. And we were able to talk about how to responsibly recreate these areas. And I noticed that within this group, we had a difference in who had already been on this trail. This was one of the most popular trails in the wilderness for Reno, and who had been here before, who had never hiked before. And that also brings a lot of learning for hikes that are specific to a community, I think. I'll go over what we learned later, but this was a big, learning opportunity. And then another project we did down in Vegas, which was graffiti removal during Hispanic Heritage Month. And we had 3 volunteers come out and removed graffiti along 0.8 miles of trail, which is amazing. And these are volunteers who had already volunteered with Friends of Nevada Wilderness before, but when seeing this project, we're really excited to have something specific to them, to their community. So this was really exciting because I did get all 3 volunteers on a project who were Spanish speakers, and we spoke English and Spanish. We had someone with the Forest Service who came out who only spoke English, but had a couple years of Spanish before. So it's bringing a community together, even if we're not speaking 100% in Spanish. And that is one of the big takeaways, is just learning to pivot from what I thought it was going to look like, this program, to what it ended up looking like. So the day after that project, I was set to lead a Hispanic Heritage Month hike. And that was Sunday morning, Fletcher Canyon Trailhead in the Mount Charleston area in Southern Nevada. And I had 10 RSVPs, but no one did show up. And that felt awful. it felt like something went wrong somewhere. Um, and I didn't have my flight back to Reno for 8 hours, and I didn't want to go sit in the airport for that long. And I realized I still had all the material to do outreach. And so I set up shop at the trailhead and talked to almost everyone who came through, which for a Sunday morning in Mount Charleston is a lot of people. So being able to just talk to hikers that went through, a lot of them spoke Spanish. I didn't want to assume, but I offered both, English and Spanish brochures, leave no trace cards. And as I was offering those, I was able to start speaking in Spanish with some folks. And I think that was a great, again, learning moment of not everything goes as planned. I definitely felt like a middle schooler whose friends didn't come to my party. Um, so I was pretty bummed and I could have just left it at that, but being able to just pivot and still be able to hand out material, talk to folks, even if it wasn't about wilderness specifically, it was just creating that connection with people who were going outside and going to explore and maybe giving them a little extra sense of safety, showing them on the map where the trail goes, or um, just saying hi. I think a lot of that is really important as well. So yeah, I did hand out 13 What is Wilderness brochures in Spanish, 10 in English, and a bunch, again, like I said, just the Leave No Trace cards do amazing. And they're very easy to you just buy. I wasn't translating any of that material. They're already accessible. So then within the NFF, grant, we had the translation of the Mount Rose Wilderness inserts, which, like the garbage ones, speak on when Mount Rose was designated, how to explore it, what you can find, what trails are good, and then responsible recreation, which at this point it was easy to kind of plug and play, I guess. There's a lot of words that are the same throughout all the different brochures we've created. So it started to become less of a challenge and more of um, it definitely felt more comfortable as the more I translated, the more things that got translated, just a lot, the responsible recreation part, you might leave out certain things, but in general, it's the same, 7 to 10 principles. Um, yeah, making sure it's understandable, but then again, once you have it, it's done. So an interesting observation for these projects and these hikes, um, which I say interesting because I don't know if it's good or bad. I think it's good to recognize, is that we only had 3 Spanish speakers on a project that I spoke to in Spanish. Um, and those 3 were from the graffiti removal. And I think with 64 volunteers under the bilingual program and only 3 being that I knew specifically were there because it was a Spanish speaking event or bilingual event, um, is interesting to know. And then on the flip side, I was leading a project, a weed pool, and it was not Spanish specific. It wasn't part of the bilingual program. And I ended up speaking to about 6 people who in Spanish. So those are the things that we start to recognize, that we can have a program and learn to use it in multiple ways, not just what's under um, that program's umbrella, I guess. Uh, so, so here we'll start with the learnings. What we've learned developing the bilingual program as a whole is that DEI initiatives cost money and take time, and our time is money, and that is something that I think most people know, but sometimes you think, well, I have it in me. I have this like urge to do it, but it does cost money. And that's why we're really grateful for the grants that we did get that kind of started this all off, and the matching grant funds and being able to take the time to do it is really important as I think doing it. And then another thing we learned was that it shouldn't be a sole person's responsibility. I think we figured this out early on with the translation, is that it shouldn't just fall on one person, whether it's translating, whether it's the projects. It's bouncing ideas off of folks is really important, as well as getting someone to proofread or ask if the flyer looks okay, with someone who also understands is felt really key. And this can also mean creating a team with your board members and volunteers. I know I sent the translations eventually to my dad, and he handed them back as if is in school with all the red circles and question marks. And having someone to reread things is really important to not feel the sole responsibility needed at the beginning of any program. Um, like I said earlier, we didn't really set specific goals, so we know our parameters and what needs to get done for these grants. But also figuring out at some point the general outreach and education is as important as what we want to do. And like I had to shift when no one showed up for my hike. It was one of those learning opportunities like I have to adapt and I can still do outreach and education just in a different way that we proposed we would. Um, and then I think setting goals is a big thing we learned. I think now it's something that I want to define a little bit more for the program is making sure we have these boundaries of what the program will look like and is so that it can remain within these goals and also for the capacity of staff who work under this program is making sure we're not that we're not over capacity, we're not doing too much. And that sometimes can happen with expectations of how long things will take or how easy some people think translating might be. Or, those things are just, it's hard unless you're doing them yourself because it's not something everyone understands. And I think having that understanding within staff is also very important. So what we learned about the bilingual project specifically within the program, and these are all personal observations. They can vary a lot on location and population. And I just want to say this is not I don't want to generalize. This is very specific to what I've been working on. And that's that the planning of a project and doing outreach remotely is very challenging. Doing outreach for projects and hikes in Vegas from Reno was very limiting. One, because I didn't have as many contacts as I have up in Reno. I was able to reach out to the radio. I have Facebook groups and we were able to post on Instagram and things that had a bigger reach than in Vegas, not having those contacts already, but also not being physically there to hang posters or to talk to folks or go to meetings and community events to promote this project or hike, I think was a big challenge. And I think we've learned from that. The Spanish speaking volunteers in Reno specifically were not the best at RSVPing in advance. And I think that was a big takeaway because the night before the first Latino Conservation Week hike, I had no RSVPs. And we're very used to having everyone plan things weeks in advance, having it on their calendar. And we ended up with 10 volunteers that day or 10 hikers but I did not know how many to expect, 2 or 15, and I had taken snacks and cold beverages, but it's just that knowing that not every community or group of people does things the same way, uh, was important to note. And with that, also the Spanish-led hikes have had a greater success in Reno than the Spanish-led projects. Again, I don't fully understand a lot of this. They're mostly observations, and I'm not trying to solve any right now. It's more of realizing what has been working and what hasn't. And also, we learned that multi-generational families are more prevalent in these communities, and making the shift from Spanish-led activities to bilingual activities might be necessary. And with that, I mean showing up to a project thinking I'm going to speak in Spanish the whole time really shifted my perspective when we did have a family out that had Spanish speaking parents, but the kids preferred English, and everyone mostly understood both languages, but being able to shift and realizing um, it doesn't need to be fully in Spanish to be part of our program. People also try to find community. We might have people who that don't speak Spanish, but are of the Latino community and want to go explore the outdoors with their community, or understand English enough to go on a project, but would feel more comfortable asking about safety in Spanish or understanding the project's details in Spanish. So I think that was learning, it's not just about the speaking in Spanish part, it's learning there's so many dimensions to every community, and learning what this community needs is different than what another community needs. And also learning bilingual can mean any languages. It means two languages. And so figuring out how to also express that bilingual English and Spanish, making sure we are communicating the right way and not just assuming things in general. So for the successes, very excited about all the translated material that we have and that can be used indefinitely. We have them ready. We have the digital parts of it, and we can print them, print more if we need. And then all these translated materials are going to end up on our, or have ended up on our website. We do have one, the first Spanish website page up already. And again, this is exciting because we might never get folks out in the field, but they might read our What is Wilderness on our website. Um, it's trying to find those connections, even when we're not in person connecting, maybe. Making sure our website is accessible as possible. Our projects that do invite Spanish speakers, to make sure the information is also in Spanish. Um, and then another big success is that we've learned a lot. And even though we've learned things that might not have gone too well, we're learning from everything we do within the program. And it just creates, hopefully in the future, a much stronger program. And learning, um, it's still such a new program that I can't say it's worked out perfectly. And I've had, like I said, issues with some of the hikes. No one shows up. It's just all information that we get to use moving forward. And that we don't know it all. We don't really know everything about everything. So being able to just look back on what we have done, what our successes are, what works, and also what doesn't work. Um, yeah, we've also, another success is I feel like we formed a lot of connections, finding communities within Reno specifically that I know I can reach out to when I want to invite them to a project. We've got the Carpenters Union, we've got Facebook groups, got the radio station, making sure keeping those connections alive and keep inviting them out. And then also, I think a great success we've had is holding space for the Spanish speakers in the outdoors. And that is inviting them, but also giving them knowledge, giving them the information about these areas in a language they might understand much better. And just making sure they feel comfortable too. I think a very important part is just recognizing that a very high percentage of, at least in Nevada, of outdoor recreation is through the Latino community, and making sure they have the resources to do that in a fun, safe, and responsible way. Oh no. Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened. Um, all right. So looking into the future, I wanted to add that uh there is a change in the administration, which has led to change in funding priorities, and agencies' capacity. And that has led to differences in our funding for this program. I did want to add that we understand that agency partners have the drive and commitment for DEI programs, but under the circumstances, we totally understand that it might not be a priority, and it's definitely something that um, isn't a priority to the administration, and we understand that, and that's also why our program is shifting moving forward. We don't have any specific bilingual funding right now. I don't know why this is doing this. I'm sorry. Um,
We're not noticing anything on our end, Meg, so
oh,
you're good. Yep.
okay,
Keep
great.
going. Yep.
The screen just keeps blinking, but I'm glad no one noticed it. Um, so looking into the future, we don't have any specific funding for the bilingual program as of now. We do have an NWSA, which again, we're very thankful for in Southern Nevada, which has a section or a part of that grant for translating material for Southern Nevada specific locations, which is really exciting to have more variety of that insert for the What is Wilderness. Um, and we do have these resources and these educational materials, supporters and connections to keep in contact with in the Spanish-speaking community. So we're going to keep doing that. We're going to make sure we're still connecting with the community, even if we're not leading big projects and hikes with them. And then with that, we've had some conversations about how we might have to shift from bilingual specific projects that are funded through a bilingual grant or Spanish speaking grant to projects in general from our general funding that might just have a small, asterisk at the bottom that says Spanish speaker or one leader is a Spanish speaker or Spanish available or spoken on this project to keep folks um, to keep that Spanish aspect in our organization without it being part of a grant. And that's going to be something we try and we'll learn from, and we still have to talk more about it. But it's something that we're trying to figure out if it's a good shift for us to make during these times. And what we're still doing to this day is we have all these materials. We have the Leave No Trace cards, the What is Wilderness with their inserts. Um, and we're going to keep giving them out. We're going to keep going into the field. We're going to keep visiting agency partners and hand them out at outreach events. Make sure we're still, again, connecting with the community as much as we can. And even if we're not handing out these Spanish materials as much as the English ones, having them as an option, I think already creates such a um, opening and accepting space that we didn't have a couple years ago. All right, I think that's the presentation. Are there any?
Awesome. Oh,
Yeah.
thanks, Meg. I would just welcome folks to, I see that Dora has posted a question in the chat. Other folks, you're welcome to post a question in the chat, or if you'd like to share, we're a pretty small group. So if you'd like to share your question verbally, go ahead and raise your hand and we'll call on you in order. So Dora's question is, how can we get a brochure?
Oh, that's very exciting. I would be happy to uh mail them to folks. I don't know where everyone is at, but I could definitely do that. If not, it's on our website that web page that is translated is the brochure in the digital form.
Joel, you're on mute.
Yeah, I'm having computer problems. Jeff, if you're ready to share your question, go ahead and I'll post Meg's email in the chat. So if you're interested in a brochure, you can reach out to her that way.
Yes, that would be great.
Thank you, Meg. This has been totally thoughtful and enlightening. And I have a question for you. I'm part of an organization in Northern Colorado that there's about 300 of us and very small Hispanic membership.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a community that's probably an hour away from where our hub is that has more of a Hispanic population. I'm just wondering, is an hour to an hour and a half drive to kind of a Hispanic workday that we could organize too long of a drive, or is that manageable from your perspective?
I don't know. I don't think so. In Vegas, there was like a 30-minute drive to where the work was, and I don't think that was a limiting factor because that's very Vegas. You just drive everywhere, from my understanding. I think it would depend on the community, and I think if there's a possibility of doing a project closer to where they're at, you're already um solving one of the hurdles, I guess, to bring the community out, if that makes sense. And if anything, starting with this outreach, letting them know your name, doing community outreach events in their location, rather than asking them to come to you, at least they'll know your name. And when you do ask them to come an hour away, I feel like then they'll feel more comfortable, like, oh, I will drive for them because they're cool, or whatever it is that they figure out about you all. Is that I think that's what that might be a good entryway, if that answers your question.
Yep. So start the relationship, basically, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I think so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jeff, Ellie asked, can you speak a bit to barriers that Spanish speakers have expressed to you, such as getting themselves to a project for hikes and the approachability of recreating in the backcountry?
Yeah, that's a great one because I do try to ask as much as possible on these hikes and projects what people's relationship to the outdoors is and how much they've done it. And I think there's so much interest, but it's yeah, there's definitely barriers to entry, like the expense of buying camping gear. And I think that's where, for us at least, we always have a stock of camping gear that people can we can lend people for projects. But even the boundary before that is coming out on a project with or like their clothes and their boots and a backpack. Those are all things that they need to provide themselves, and that is a boundary of entry. Um, I think probably the commitment. A lot of our projects are more than it. Our day long projects are a couple hours, sometimes during the week, sometimes on the weekends. I think the time commitment some of these are, and that's why I think starting with just like showing face and showing your logo, showing who you are before they commit to that much. I think that's part of it is the commitment to going out with a group, whereas for themselves, they can decide morning of, put on a pair of sneakers and go out, whereas we require you be there by 8 with boots and a backpack. And I think that might be part of, generally speaking, the community's yeah. Does that answer your question?
Ellie gave you the heart. Sounds like it
Okay.
does. Thanks so much. I have a question. What advice would you give to someone wanting to initiate this type of program in their area?
Oh gosh, that's hard. I guess maybe know the why. I definitely think understanding why you're doing it is important. I feel very passionate about it, so I enjoy working through the challenges, but if it shouldn't be something you do to check off a box, I feel like. And I know it's needed and I would love it to be everywhere, but I think understanding why you're doing it is important. And then from there would probably be seeking funding that either is for a specific community or also finding funding that allows you to do it. So you can get general funding that's not for underserved communities, but within that funding, you can work your outreach and make sure you're talking to the right communities if that's what you want to bring out. And I think I don't know, that's not how we did it. I mean, we got funding for bilingual program and we just went running for 18 months with it. So it's that I guess that would be my advice.
Great, thanks. Um, I have more questions, so I guess I'll share my questions, and if other folks have questions, feel free to raise your hand or pop them in the chat. What do you like? Let's say you had all the money you could have for this program in the world. What is your big vision for where it could go and what you could do with it?
That is a hard question. I definitely would like to have more translated material. And I think with projects and hikes, I think keeping it consistent. I think I really noticed when we had the Latino Conservation Week hike a second year, it was maybe easier to plan and to do outreach for because I had already done such work the year before. And if anything, I expanded on that. It might have taken the same amount of time the year before, but I had a base to start with. So I think being able to do a yearly, Latino Conservation Week hike, a yearly project, and maybe even introduce an overnight project, understanding that the first couple years might not actually bring any Latinos out or Spanish speakers out, but eventually maybe, like I said, people see it enough that they might start feeling comfortable. They start out on a hike and then they come out to a project and then eventually they come out on a overnight, like a camping project. And I think with that, it's hard to do when you don't have multi-year funding, because you can't see that large scale. But if I did have that, I think creating just projects like that are recurring year after year over Memorial Day weekend is always going to be an overnight project in this wilderness area. And I think that would be really cool.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, I have one more question and then I'll see if we have more coming in from the group. What would you say, like, well, maybe there's two questions here and you can answer whichever one you like, but I'm curious what you think, like in its nascent form, the most powerful outcome of this project or these projects has been. And maybe a side question to that is, what changes have you noticed already from some of this work?
Hmm. I think I think like I was mentioning earlier, having someone who worked for us for a AmeriCorps season actually just say this is the best thing that I could have had to explain to my family. I think that's just it is a very personal and very small maybe um act takeaway, but it was big. It felt big because it also helped me explain to my family what we're doing. It gave us words, it gave us the yeah, the words to explain why we're so passionate about what we do. And I think that's a big takeaway. And what was the second question?
Just maybe what you've noticed or what change you've
Oh,
noticed already with some of this work or as a result of it.
yeah. Um, that people are excited to be outdoors, and I think that existed already, but I think now being in in these making us be in these places of, handing out brochures at the trailhead, or having the option of English and Spanish is actually noticing how many folks are interested in the Spanish version, how many folks are excited to be outside. Um, and I don't know if that's a direct result or if I'm just noticing it now, but definitely just understanding the leave no trace principles, or even what the area, how big the area you're in and why it's designated, um or why there's no bikes, like things like that. I think are my takeaways and my like, yeah, I think that's what I would say.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Um, any other questions floating around out there for Meg before we wrap up today?
Hi, I have one,
Go ahead.
or maybe a couple. I'm from Arizona State Parks, and we are in our infancy stages right now of developing, talking of developing brochures and getting bilingual interpretive guides. I think we have a heads up with, we have a huge bilingual community that come to certain parks that we have. And those are the parks we were thinking of starting this process with. Um, what would be your focus to start this, so like we're not running all over the place. We have an agenda
Yeah.
and how to do that.
um I would say start with the bigger picture, so maybe state parks, like if even if you're going to put them in only a few specific state parks, but one general flyer that you can put in all of them before being detailed of the specific parks, if that makes sense. So maybe a leave no trace, those are like an easy principle to write out, and that's something you can take from the leave no trace that already exist, which again, I'm obsessed. But if you can like make a flyer of that, it's probably they might even have them already made and put those up at each of those. And then from there, translating your own materials. Um, Yeah, start small. I think once you have the general wording, it's easier, like I was saying, to make more brochures once you know what words, translate state parks, translate specific things to your area, plants, animals, whatever they might encounter. Like make sure you have all those general concepts first, and then I would move from there to the specific, like this park is this, has all these things. Um, Maybe even like leave no trace safety, I would say second, which is general for probably all of them, and then the specifics. And then from there, you can get as detailed as you want. But I would do something general that would work for every park or every, and I'm talking about, I don't know if you have them, but I'm talking about more of like trailhead signs. Because once
Yes.
you get into the brochures, yeah, I think what we've noticed too, once you get into the brochures, is you have to physically be out there handing them out or leave them at ranger stations and things like that, which is I think not as accessible as at the trailhead.
And it's a great opportunity. We have bilingual workers, but
Yeah,
they're not our interpreter guides. So that would be
right.
great to have that translated, to
Yeah,
have them be some interpreter guides at some of our parks where we know it's a huge Hispanic community.
yeah.
And we have a camp out, a family camp out that we do
Nice.
here, but might be nice to maybe redesignate it to a Hispanic family camp out and
Hmm.
have translators there that are needed because I'm sure we're not marketing to the Hispanic community, we're just marketing in general. But I
Right.
think you gave me great ideas where to start marketing, where to um build that team with the outside media and stuff, and maybe they can start participating, that would bring more hikers to maybe we do a hiking day, especially
Mhm.
for Hispanic Heritage Month.
Yeah,
Those are all such great ideas.
I'm glad. Yeah, I think that's very exciting that you're starting work on that.
Thank you. I'll be tapping into you for more guidance.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to.
Great. Thank you so much for this.
Any other questions floating around out there before we close today? All right. Well, thank you so much, Meg. I learned a lot and I'm really excited about this project and I can't wait to see where you take it in the future and how it grows and benefits your wilderness areas and your communities long term. So thanks so much for joining us today, Meg, and everyone else. As a friendly reminder, a recording of this webinar will be posted to NWSA's YouTube channel soon. And we'll share links to the recording with you via email. We'll also have those posted on our website. So please feel welcome to share the link in your circles if you find this information will be useful for your work. We really enjoy offering these webinars for free to our entire audience. So if you or your organization are a current member, thank you. Your support supports these webinars. If you're not yet a member or a contributor and appreciate this content, we'd love to have you join us. You can just use the donate link that I will post in the chat. Next month on August 12th, we're excited to welcome Jeremy Lynch from the Southern Utah Wilderness Alliance and Bjorn Fredrickson from New Mexico Wild. And they're going to be talking about building a stewardship arm within an advocacy organization. So even if you're not an advocacy organization or from the nonprofit sector, I think their insights will apply across your partnerships and might help spark some new ideas for your own programs. So I hope you join us. You can stay up to date on future webinars by subscribing to our newsletter and our YouTube channel. And you can always visit our website to see our full webinar lineup and connect with past webinars. I've got all those links in the chat. And I think that's a wrap. So thanks everybody for joining us. I hope you all have an excellent week. Goodbye.